Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jody Allen, and I'm the Robert Francis Ings Director of the Lemon Project, A Journey of Reconciliation. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this panel, Student Memorial Art, as part of our 11th Annual Lemon Project Spring Symposium, 4 Centuries of Black Women in America, Freedom, Activism, and Justice for All. Before I begin, I'd like to share the following 2 statements with you. William & Mary acknowledges the indigenous peoples who are the original inhabitants of the lands our campus is on today: the Cherokees, Nottoway, Chickahominy, Eastern Chickahominy, Mattaponi, Monacan, Nansemond, Nottoway, Pamunkey, Potomac, Upper Mattaponi, and Rappahannock tribes, and pay our respect to their tribal members, past and present. Also, the Lemon Project stands with the rest of William & Mary in solidarity with our Asian, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, Southwest Asian colleagues and students to say that anti-Asian hate is unacceptable and has no place at William & Mary. It's my pleasure now to turn over the moderating of this session to the leaders, or 2 of the leaders of the William & Mary Student Assembly, Anthony Joseph, the Student Assembly President, and Kyle Vasquez, the Student Assembly Vice President. And I'm going to turn it specifically over to Kyle, who will be getting us started with this, looking at and considering this amazing student art. Thank you very much and enjoy.
Thank you, Dr. Allen, for that introduction. Yeah, I'd just like to start with kind of how the idea came to be. So it was Asia and I had talked about how important diversity and inclusion was for us and our platform. And that's something that I kept in mind throughout the summer. And I kept trying to find ways that I wanted to personally try to implement that. And it was during quarantine, in the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, that I decided, on a whim, to watch the documentary 13th, which is about how the prison system has been an extension of slavery. And during the documentary, they did this scene where they put the names of all the people who have died on the hands of police brutality on pieces of tape and taped them on a wall. And I thought, wow, like that was so powerful. Like I thought that was so beautiful. And so I called Lonnie on the phone. And I was like, have you ever seen 13th? Lonnie is our chief of staff. And so I called Lonnie and I'm like, have you seen 13th? And she's like, yeah, I have. And I was like, oh, we should do something like that. And after just a little talking, she was like, what if we did better? We have so many talented students at William & Mary. What if we did paintings to honor the enslaved? And I was like, yes, yes, that sounds like an awesome idea. And so after that, it really was just logistics. And I have to give all the credit to Lonnie Wright. She really helped me figure out this like one-step idea and developed it to a whole project. And with that, AJ, do you have any words before I turn it to the panelists?
You captured all of it well. I think the only thing I would add is from being on the committee for the Memorial and Enslaved, as we were discussing the designs, there's a lot of excitement that's coming with that. And I remember in one of our exec meetings, we were talking and, this idea had spawned because we were all thinking the same, like, I wish there was something we could really do right now, right? To show students that we're moving in that direction. And then Kyle and Lonnie are like, oh, we have a brilliant idea for that. And it's off to them because they've been the ones that really spearheaded this project. And it's truly something that I think is going to be meaningful that we will see on the campus in tandem with the memorial to the enslaved for years to come.
Yeah, thanks, AJ. So with that, I'll turn it to the specific artists who will share their name, their year, and just a little bit of how their painting came to be. Sarah, would you like anyone in particular to go first, or can it be like popcorn style?
I think Megan's gonna go first.
Awesome.
I'm Megan Davis. I am currently a graduate school in graduate school for the School of Education, and my painting is EFRA 1768. And in the background, I have a Nelson Mandela quote. It says, "For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." Because we don't know very much about each of the individuals that we have the names for, I thought I would rather do hands as opposed to an actual portrait. Sorry, I don't know if you heard that in the background, but I did hands instead of an actual portrait because I didn't want to give an identity that was not that person's identity to them. But the way that I have the quote in the background with "that respects and enhances the freedom of others," I have it partially obscured because we do talk a lot about the freedom specifically of African Americans in this country, and giving Black Lives Matter movement a chance to sort of have their light shined on this population of people that really does deserve to be noticed, that does deserve to have the same freedoms as others. But it's still very obscure. Their opportunities are not always there. And in order for us to truly say that everyone is free, we need to make sure that we're bringing this to light, saying that we are respecting and enhancing their freedoms, not just standing on soapboxes saying, "Oh, Black Lives Matter." We need to do something to show that. So I have the hands with the chains, and I think that what I was trying to get at is honoring this person as an individual, showing that they do matter, that we do need to respect and enhance the history of that person, and we need to continue to do that in the future. So that was basically what my ideas were when I was creating this painting.
Hi everyone, my name is Arya Austin. I am a senior at William & Mary, majoring in government with a minor in English. The title of my painting is Unknown but Not Forgotten. When I was thinking about what to paint, I was really inspired by the memorial to the enslaved that will be on campus hopefully soon, and the idea that there are so many people, so many slaves, so many African Americans that have contributed to building this country, and we will never know their names. So that's why this painting, they are faceless, because we may not know who they are, but we appreciate them and acknowledge all the labor that they put into making America to what it was, making the college to what it was. And that's why the gold in the background is also there to kind of symbolize like this idea of wealth, but it wouldn't be there without these people and all that they contributed. So really acknowledging there are so many people that we may never know their stories, but they are integral to our history.
So I just wanted to give a little bit of background. And for me personally, grappling with William and Mary's colonial racist history has really been an ongoing process since I applied. And actually, I was really excited to be part of this because the work of the Lemon Project influenced my choice to attend William and Mary in the first place. So I'm a transfer student, I'm a junior, and last fall was my first semester here. And I have studied visual art in the past, even though I'm studying psychology and Latin American studies now. So this, I thought, was a great way to kind of unite that cultural perspective with art. And last semester, I was really inspired to participate as well because I took a course about global indigenous cultures from Dr. Rivera Santana. And at one point we learned about the role of visual representation in communal memory and how portraying an entity or a person in a ritualized performance or creating images can be a way of keeping that entity or person alive in a sense. So I feel like this project allows us to engage with the continued presence of enslaved people who built and maintained this institution, and to center them in our current dialogues, and to harness the power of art and storytelling to do that. So for this piece, I was just given a name, Tom Mask, son of Molly, belonging to the college, along with a list of activities that might have been involved in the daily lives of enslaved people, and the two statements, William and Mary benefited from the labor of enslaved people for more years than it has not, and William and Mary owned enslaved people and profited from their labor both directly and indirectly. So aside from their names and that association, I didn't know anything about Tom Mask and Molly, but I wanted to really bring these people to life and portray them as specific individuals so that I didn't perpetuate racist ideas of Black people as monolithic. And I wanted to kind of show that even though I don't know the specific identity of these people, they did have, you know, real faces with textures and lines and thoughts. So knowing that a majority of enslaved people were stolen from the western regions of Africa, and having learned a little bit about the resulting Yoruba cultural influence in lands now called the Americas, I chose photos of Yoruba people as references for my painting. And it was really important for me to show Molly and Tom together to emphasize the importance of lineage and relationships, because a staggering number of families were torn apart, but enslaved people still really valued their kin and were tenacious in maintaining those connections. So I did find out after the painting actually that Tom Mask is listed in local records as having been baptized on February 9th, 1766. So I know that he was alive on that date at least, and that gives some sort of concrete tie to imagine him. And in my painting, I used brick in that little section on the left to tie the piece to the physical structure of William and Mary, and then use that color again in Molly's garment. And that reddish color to me is reminiscent of soil and drying blood, but it's also a color of strength. The blue and periwinkle brush marks in the background form the shape of a halo, indicating that their lives are sacred, but also acting as reference to the canopy of the sky, the waters of the Middle Passage, and the indigo dyes used in Yoruba textiles. The golden tan pattern represents land and sunlight, and I portrayed Molly as wearing a cowrie shell necklace because those shells hold a variety of meanings in different societies, but the woman in the reference photo I used was wearing a necklace like that, and I learned that in Yoruba culture, cowrie shells were used as currency and in divination, decoratively, and they could also represent protection and female power. And then finally, the position of the figures shows their dignity and the love between Tom and Molly as mother and son, and the direct gaze is meant to create an immediate connection with the viewer that demands respect and also kind of gently challenge any assumptions they made to it. So I really appreciated the opportunity to be part of this and share my piece.
Hi, my name is Will. I'm a senior at the undergraduate college, and the person that I was dedicating this portrait to is Johnny. I received information that Johnny was the son of Nancy and was one of the enslaved people of Benjamin Waller, and that Johnny was born on December 14th in 1756, as well as a baptism date that was the same as Tom Mask in the previous portrait. In my years at William & Mary, I've noticed portraits with gold frames all around campus, like those in the halls of the Wren building and every floor, as well as the ones that I walk by daily in the business school building that are mostly, if not all, white individuals, and wondered what it would be like to also come across equal caliber portraits recognizing both Black and enslaved Black persons in the history of William & Mary. So I wanted this to be a euphemism for the ways in which we're forced to create the memory of individuals like Johnny through the incomplete collections of information that we have access to, which really only contains information that their oppressors deemed worthy of not even maintaining, but noting at all at that point in time. And kind of like the first two paintings that were presented, I didn't want to create a face that doesn't belong to Johnny. Not to say that other works of art in the world, imagining what those individuals looked like or could have looked like, aren't meaningful in their own ways. But I chose to kind of let the limited information that we do have access to serve as the visual representation of Johnny's identity, and provoke the want and the curiosity to know what they look like in real life by being a reminder that we don't have that privilege. And then also echo the statement that we received as a reminder of William and Mary's history of profiting from the labor of these individuals. So including that as part of the identity visualized on the portrait.
My name is Sarah Sutton, and I am an MBA student at William and Mary. Also went to William and Mary for undergrad, and really am grateful for the opportunity to participate in this project. I actually learned about the Honoring the Enslaved project through an announcement in the Student Happenings email newsletter, which I'm extremely grateful for that news outlet, particularly since I live off campus, and with COVID, it's a great way to stay in the loop. And I was just really struck by the, intrigued and struck by the effort and desire to honor the enslaved at William and Mary. It's such an incredible initiative. And I was just sharing with my daughters that I'd seen an announcement about this project, and we've had a lot of conversations recently, particularly since George Floyd's murder. And they just really were like, "Mom, you have to participate, you need to submit something." So with that nudge and an effort to take action, as I often try to encourage my daughters to do, I decided to participate. And I really think that for me, taking part in this was a step in embracing the concept that I can take action where I am. I feel like many times, particularly as a single mother and facing a lot of challenges, when I look at the world and our country in particular, and the racial injustices and systemic problems, it can all often feel really big, just insurmountable. And where do I start? What can I do? In African American folklore, there's an incredible quote that I actually rely on frequently, that states, "God makes 3 requests of his children: do what you can, where you are, with what you have now." And I'm committed to learning and growing and guiding my children in that process. And so this felt like a really great way to engage and do something where I am. My painting or piece is entitled Faith Forward, and my subject is Lucy. I received only Lucy's name and an 18th century date, and spent a lot of time meditating and reflecting before actually getting a design down. I thought a lot about the strength of character and concepts like persistence and fortitude and just faith that must have been required. And as I really reflected on what I imagined or felt, what energy was coming to me as I meditated on this, I really just kept being drawn to this concept of fortitude and faith, and a choice that one must make to be faith-filled and persist and face the future despite fear and uncertainty of the life experience that I imagine Lucy had. And so I really just tried to embrace this concept of faith forward for future generations. So my piece is actually mixed media. The background is acrylic with a representation of the ocean and the sun. And for me, this, I was channeling here sort of the fact that there's this vastness that could easily drown one's hope, could drown one in fear and uncertainty, but it could also be representative of limitless opportunity and boundless faith. And so I really tried to just embrace and think about that concept of strength and faith. The sunflowers are actually watercolor. painted on watercolor paper and then cut and pasted to the piece. And, you know, sunflowers being representative of loyalty, I just really thought about Lucy's loyalty to the legacy of future generations and the strength that that represents. In Native cultures, the sunflowers can also represent harvest and provision. And I was thinking a lot in terms of the faith that she must have had that God will provide and that she would be given the strength that she needs. And then Lucy herself is a collage actually made from cutouts from magazines and a montage of various Black Americans, because I feel like Lucy represents in this piece just the strength and fortitude of generations and generations, and with a nod to the William and Mary location with the green and gold hair tie. But I really just wanted to capture her strength, natural beauty and strength. And I just would really like to share that it's been an honor truly to participate in this process. It's been a personal process for my family and me, and really would like to just use it as a recommitment of my effort to be involved in allyship and advocacy and take action where I am, and to really encourage others and urge others to take action within your spheres of influence as well. So thank you so very much for the opportunity.
Wow. Okay. Well, I've seen the work before, but this is the first time I've had an opportunity to meet and hear the stories of any of the artists. And so I want to thank you five so much for joining us today. You all are grateful, and I can't tell you how grateful we are. You know, the memorial project is so important to so many of us. We've been working on it, you know, for a very long time. It has its roots are within the Student Assembly. So I'm also grateful to AJ and Kyle and Lonnie for initiating this project. And I think, as you said, AJ, I think it will live on this campus for a very, very long time. Every time we think of the memorial. And so I am very grateful to all of you, and grateful for all of you for being here on a Saturday morning. You know, I remember being a student, and maybe Saturday morning being the time I could sleep. And so I appreciate you all being here. Before we get to the Q&A, I'm going to ask, because there were, I don't know, Kyle, how many total pieces were submitted? Do you know your AJ?
Yeah, we had about 45 paintings submitted, so we had a good number.
Okay, so we're going to show, not everybody was able to be here today, and some folks just prefer to be anonymous. And so, but we do have permission to show the work. And so we'll show all of the work and then get to Q&A. Okay. So beautiful work. You know, it helps us to imagine, you know, because unfortunately, someday we may open up the right box and find some 18th or 19th century sketches of some of these individuals, but you know, we don't know. But we know we can imagine them, you know, and in many different ways. As children, as adults, as we see there in those, you know, we can imagine the families of, we know that William and Mary enslaved families because we see it, we see it in the record, you know, and we don't know what happened to those families. We know quite often, of course, that enslaved families were broken up fairly quickly or easily as the need prevailed, you know, and we know that it had to be a horrible life to live for so many reasons. So let's see if we can get to some of the audience questions. Let's see, powerful work. Will these be retained someplace? What are your plans for the artwork in the future? Will they be displayed?
Yeah, I can speak on this a little bit. So it's still moving pieces as to what exactly we're going to do with them. But for right now, they've been given to the Muscarel, and the Muscarel is going through them and taking high quality pictures of them, much higher quality than the ones that we saw in the PowerPoint. I took those on with my phone. So they have a professional taking care of that. And they are selecting some of the paintings to be part of the president's art collection. And then with the ones that aren't selected, I'm gonna see how many of them aren't collected. And then I will probably meet back with Dr. Allen and be like, what should I do with these? And there is a tentative project on, I believe, April 26th. So everyone look out for student happenings, you know, ask around departments. There's going to be an event where the paintings are projected onto the Wren building. And that's going to be with the Muscarel. So we'll hope, fingers crossed, because of everything going on with COVID, I'm not sure if it'll get approved, but I'm really hoping that it does.
Yeah, I see these paintings as being a part, as I said, of William and Mary. They're a beautiful part of the story we're trying to tell. We are revitalizing and bringing back these people who we do not know and only know by bits and pieces. And then there's some people we don't even have a name for. We just know a particular skill that they had, or we know based on a record that they ran a particular errand one day for someone. But they were there, they were real. They made the lives of the students and the faculty and the staff livable. You know, they made sure they had the water and the wood for the cooking and the fires, and they had clean rooms and clean offices, and that their horses were taken care of, and that their shoes were cleaned and so forth. So it's they were an important, vital part of the community, and they need to be restored to that community. And so through the memorial and through this art, they are being restored. And so Kyle and I will definitely talk, but we will make sure that these works are maintained and honored as they should be, you know, for, as the saying goes at William and Mary, all time coming. So let's see. I'll stop talking again and ask another question. Is there any possibility of auctioning them as part of One Tribe, One Day for a designated contribution to the memorial or some other designated fund? I don't.
A good question. I haven't thought about that. AJ, I don't know if you've thought about that. AJ and I have thought about potentially getting some of the paintings to become, getting them printed to become like booklets and selling the booklets and using those funds to help out with local communities, or, you know, if the memorial needs any more funds. But we haven't thought of an auction. So that's a great idea. AJ, do you have any thoughts on that?
I certainly think that's quite possible. And yeah, just to highlight the coffee book idea was something that we were, a preliminary idea that we had to, you know, generate funds for DEI and the memorial and other things. However, you know, we have to acknowledge that we're 3 people. Kyle and Lonnie specifically are 2. So that's the open invitation to anyone who would like to help that endeavor. Please email us after this and come and talk to us. But that was a thought, and we hope that with our successors, they could hopefully do another painting endeavor akin to this, and then add that to the fold. And this can become more of a constant thing rather than just a one-time endeavor.
I really like the idea of a book. That's great, you know, and so we'll definitely, you know, I know soon y'all are getting ready to graduate, but we'll have a conversation before this current student assembly folks graduate for sure. Let's see, do you think this or something like this can be an annual project that the SA and the Lemon Project sponsors annually?
Again, yes, I certainly see so. And we've been talking amongst ourselves as SA, and then with our successors, we'll talk with them and determine, you know, how we can move these things and keep these things again as a constant. But even in COVID times, and Kyle, you could speak to this more specifically, it was a little bit of a hassle to get the materials out there, but once we did and we were able to get the paintings back, I think things were a lot easier. And it's doable, it's achievable. It just demands more work than just 2 people. Kyle?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, AJ. The project was definitely a lot of me and Lonnie having to figure out the logistics. I have this, if anyone wants to see it, you can shoot me an email. I have this color coordinated Google Doc with every single name of every single person that submitted an interest form. We had about like 100 people fill out like an interest form. And then of those 100, like only like 50 came to pick up art supplies. And then we got about 48 that completed and returned the painting. So it was a lot of like emailing people and be like, do you still want to participate? Is everything okay? And those little logistics, just, it takes a lot of time and work. The idea came about in like July, and we weren't fully complete until like November. So I would just advise, you know, the future SA, definitely, we are looking into doing another round of these, not necessarily this semester, but definitely next semester, hopefully. I would just advise that it's a bigger team of people kind of working that in, just because it took up a lot of time. But it was worth it. I'm really glad I did it. And hearing everyone talk about their pieces personally, like, really choked me up a little, because you know, the whole goal, and I'm going on a tangent, I apologize, but the whole goal of the project was to remind people, when we hear about slavery, it's really easy to think about it in numbers and in names, and you don't really think of the humanity behind it. And I think something that these art pieces do is that it shows you either a body part or a face or a faceless face, and it reminds you, like, these are human beings. These were real actual people. And it kind of slaps you in the face with that reality. You can't ignore it anymore. You can't avoid it anymore. Like, these were real human beings with real feelings that had to deal with such excruciating circumstances. It like makes my stomach hurt, but in this really powerful way.
Yeah, when you see, you know, blurbs on websites saying William Mary profited from the labor of enslaved folks, you just see those words, you don't see the people. And this is a very powerful way to see them, to humanize them, to recognize their story and the trajectory of William Mary's role and how it's been played in the hands of racism and white supremacy then and now. And Whitney, I saw your comment, but seriously, thank all of you, the artists, Sarah, Whitney, Will, Meghan, and Aria, for doing that work, because that's, you know, we could have came up with an idea and give you tools, but to actually come up with something is truly remarkable.
And you could, as you say, AJ, you all could have come up with the idea and no one responded, you know? So, so this is all very awesome. Well, another question, some of the artists mentioned doing research before creating your piece. What kind of research did you do? Was there anything that surprised you or specifically inspired you?
Do you mind repeating that question? I think it got a little muffled.
Okay, sure. Okay, so this is in relation, some of you mentioned that you did some research, you researched as you were thinking about what you wanted to do, what you wanted your piece to be. And so what kind of research did you do? And was there anything that surprised you or specifically inspired you?
I'll chime in on that briefly. For me, as I mentioned, I just received the name Lucy, and it was really great getting to hear some of the other artists' stories and see how some people got more information, you know, with familial relationships or baptism dates and that type of thing. So I did a little research on just looking into what some of the different roles were for the slaves, and was quite frankly had an eye-opening experience of the expansive nature in which people served, and the different roles that people had, which didn't help necessarily as far as nailing down anything specific for Lucy, who I was attempting to honor. But what it did do is really opened up my heart to the expansive experience and the collective experience. And I did look into, for some reason I was drawn to crops. So I was looking into crops in 18th century Williamsburg as well. And ultimately settled on just an emotive experience and what I felt was what energy was kind of coming to me. And that's where I landed on fortitude and faith and loyalty and legacy. So that's that was my process.
Yeah, you're one of the things that you're saying there, Sarah, you know, just, you know, of course, made me think about just our work as we're in the archives, you know, and sometimes you get more information about one person than you do about another. You know, the Lemon Project was named after Lemon because we know the most about him, and we know 4 details of a life lived, and we believe he lived to be an older man. And so we know four things, but for most of the people, we know nothing except they existed, you know. And so that's the reality of doing this work and doing this kind of research. Anyone else in terms of your research endeavors? And even if, I guess, even if you didn't necessarily do, say, archival research in terms of just, you know, as you were thinking about what you wanted to do, or what you were hoping to be able to do.
For me, it was really striking and continues to be the lack of information, and the fact that people were dehumanized to such an extent that only a name or a date, or not even those things, were recorded. But I was mostly drawing on what I had learned in previous classes, African American history and Indigenous cultures, and kind of refreshed my knowledge of some of the movement of people in the specific way that happened, and cultural influences from the Yoruba in the Caribbean and the East Coast of the US. And I really enjoyed seeing some of the patterns of the textiles and different like materials and symbolisms that were used. But primarily I was just really impacted by spending time looking at different faces and kind of meditating on their lives, and thinking about the resilience and the fact that, you know, there were relationships between people that persisted despite all of the challenges.
Okay. We do have another question here. When the paintings were displayed, what was the response to the project on campus among faculty, staff, and other students?
I can touch on this a little, and AJ, if you want to take over after. I think people were very receptive about it. I think people were very excited. People were emotional. A lot of people were wondering if we were selling the paintings, which was, you know, I think that's a good feeling, because I think that was everyone's way of saying that the paintings are beautiful, and they really are. You know, many of the paintings like brought me to tears the first time I saw them. So. AJ, Lonnie and I were a little worried actually that they were not going to be perceived well. And I think that might have been some of our internal insecurities speaking. You know, there is real reason for us to have thought that in present day America, that maybe some people would not have reacted kindly to the paintings. And we were worried that they would have either gotten stolen or vandalized. So you can, I wish Lonnie was here to speak on this, because we would check in we had about 2 days that they were out in Sadler, and I would go like every hour just to see if they were okay, because I was so scared. And Lonnie was doing the same thing. And really it was just because I felt this like immense, I felt like the paintings were almost like my children. Like I was like, I need to take care of them. They need to be safe. I felt this odd connection with them. So, but no, to my surprise, and I think to AJ and Lonnie's as well, like people were so receptive and so considerate of the paintings. And when one did happen to fall off the display, students would come running to pick it up and, you know, give it to someone in the Sadler Center to make sure that it, you know, it goes back up respectfully. So to answer the question in one sentence, I think the community took it really well and really appreciated that this came to be.
Yeah, I remember the frantic texts during board week in November, and Kyle and Lonnie like, are they still there? Can we go and check? But and just to your point, Kyle, I remember as we were putting them up and arranging them for the display for the 2 days that we had them there, students would actually come and observe and look and say, wow, this is really awesome. And for those of them that didn't know, we were able to talk about them and like, this is what we did. And there was a strong emphasis in the beginning on Kyle and Lonnie's end to make this, you know, not capitalizing off of their pain, but to educate and to pay respect to their perseverance. And I really think, and then obviously, you know, we can say these things, but it really is to the artist to understand that too. And I think from all ends, it was a very respectful and very well done thing, and it was very well received.
If I may interject as someone that attended, like when they first were presented, I was so excited. They were beautiful because, you know, like you make art, but you don't see anyone else's until the time comes. I was like, these are absolutely incredible. I just spent like an hour looking at all of them and trying to figure like, what's the story behind this one? So it's always really cool seeing and learning about what the work that went into each of these paintings today. So yeah.
Absolutely, Aria. I had the same response. I mean, and I think I even said it to Kyle and AJ and Lonnie, who were there when I went to see the exhibit, because I was nervous too, you know, about, and I think unfortunately we live in a time where we really don't know what the response is going to be, you know, just to certain things. And I'm so glad, and I think it's so telling of the positive at William and Mary, you know, but I also enjoyed looking at them and imagining what the story behind, you know, the stories that you all have shared, you know, and there are many others that I haven't gotten to hear, but imagining that. But also I take it another step further, because I often think about what would they think about this? What would Lemon think about this, you know? Could, you know, in their wildest dreams? Could they have imagined this, you know? But I also, as someone, one of the speakers, and it may have been Dr. Whitehead this morning, was that, you know, I think of, you know, I am here because somebody didn't give up. I mean, we're, you know, and truthfully, that's true for all of us, right? You know, some ancestor that could have said, you know, I'm done with this, didn't, you know, and so we're here. And so I think imagining them, you know, in the ways that you all have and some of the other students have is so important. So any other, we're just about out of time. Any questions that you all might want to ask of each other? Fellow artists. Or any Kyle or AJ or anyone, any last comments before we wrap up?
I'm curious how you all chose your materials and colors, and also if there was anything that you kind of felt like you learned from the piece after creating it. Because I know that often when I make an artwork, I can look back and say like, oh, I noticed the symbolism or this element to it that I didn't even really intentionally put into it. So what was your kind of thought process or emotional experience creating these?
Well, I myself, I'm an art teacher. I've taught in 4 different states, and I've taught high school and elementary. And I have worked, the second school I worked in was in Louisiana in a parish, which is a very impoverished area where it's, they're considered 90-90-90 schools where 90% of the children are at risk. They qualify for free and reduced lunch, and 90% are minority. So working in a school like that, when you say like, oh, it's free, it's public school, everyone gets the same. Just working in that one school system, the district of Ascension Parish, you can go to one side of the bridge, which is the Sunshine Bridge, and you have these great schools where it's majority white students. And then you come to the other side of the bridge and it's a majority are African American or Hispanic, and it is not the same. You get Title I funding and you're saying, oh, everyone is the same. It's free. It's public schooling. Everyone has the same opportunities. And that goes back to why I chose the Nelson Mandela quote saying like, yes, you're saying all these wonderful things that all the students are getting the same opportunities. All the students are getting free access to public education, and they're having technology and all these wonderful opportunities, but it is not the same. And it's not the same unless you're actually providing those opportunities to the students where, yes, you're saying one thing, but unless you're going back and you're sort of providing those advantages that it's not always fair is equal and equal is fair. But you have to do something to actually help those children. Like it says, enhancing freedom. You're enhancing their opportunities, you're enhancing their privileges. And that's sort of why I picked that quote. But also when I got my information about EPHRA, one said it was EPHRA, EPHRA, and the other one that I got in a separate section said EPHA with no R. And when I inquired like which one is correct, they're like, well, we're not really sure. It's been referenced 2 ways. What are their duties? It was just very general, like making sure hallways were swept, making sure water was gotten, making sure areas were cleaned. So it's like the laborer's hands. How many things do people do with their hands? The amount of different, I guess, roles that they take and what they're actually contributing is something that's often seen as like insignificant to us. We just take things like that for granted because it's just the water's there. The food is ready. The room is clean. So that was sort of what I was reflecting back on when I was thinking of how I wanted to portray this person because I had so little information on them and how, like previous people were saying, you don't realize someone had to continue and not give up just to get to the point that you're at. But how can we even now, continue to allow people to say that they're not going to give up? What opportunities can we provide to others so that they can continue on in the future, I guess?
For me, I just really like painting with acrylics. I think that's the biggest thing. I like mixing them, and I did take into consideration like what are William and Mary's colors, and tried to add a little bit of that spice in there too if I could. So I think that's the main thing that I took into consideration in painting it.
That makes me smile, Aria, because in my case, I started with the acrylics and I found it frustrating on that canvas. The canvas was a little bumpy and then I was feeling really constrained, wherein my sort of meditation and reflection on Lucy was very like just big and boundless. And then I was feeling really constrained with this acrylic, even though I love mixing the colors. I had a lot of fun making the teal color in particular. So then it just sort of was a very organic process for me. I really just started putting paint down and then building on things as I went. I didn't really have a preconceived notion. It just all kind of happened, but I felt boundless in a way. So that I think that's what led to the mixed media and kind of adding different pieces on with the watercolor and the collage and color. Like I just felt really drawn to color because I wanted to celebrate her and celebrate, just faith and persistence. So that came out in color for me.
Okay. Well, we are out of time. I wish we were in person and we could sit around with some coffee or something and just keep talking, but alas, that can't be. But I want to thank you all again so much for being here, for AJ and Kyle and Lonnie for coming up with the idea and persisting through the challenges of the logistics and COVID and all of that, and for Whitney and Will, and Sarah and Aria and Meghan. Thank you so much for again for being here today and sharing so much with us. There's just to let you know, there's from 2 to 3:30, we're having a workshop that's being led by our Dr. Catherine Meeks. She was the keynote speaker last night. And then tonight at 6, we have our final event, which again will be showcasing alums, I think at least one undergrad, and it's being produced by Francis Tinkle Agua, who's in the theater department, but also the director of the APIA, APA. I'm going to let that go. But anyway, it will be produced tonight, and it will be performances and a different kind of art. But we're closing with the arts again, and so I want to invite you all back tonight, and I will hopefully see some of you at 2 o'clock for Dr. Meeks' workshop. And again, thank you so much. Have a great time, great day. Enjoy the rest of your beautiful day here.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.